Hello and welcome to another episode of Altcoin Thursdays, or Thursday. Depends how many of these you make, Don, I suppose. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. A quick bit of admin first. For those of you who haven't been receiving the newsletter, it's because we've taken a temporary pause while we rework it, and we're going to make it better and sort of bring it into the modern age. And in the interim, while we sort through that, we decided that Altcoin Thursday would be quite fun. Don, very important question to start off with. Was that noise you wiping the crumbs of the chips you were stuffing down your face off your desk, or was it something else?
It was crumbs, but it was not me eating them. For some reason, like my daughter keeps on spilling shit on me, basically, and I just noticed that I had a bunch of shit on my shirt, basically,
Oh,
which
fantastic.
keeps on happening pretty much constantly.
Understandable. Well, at least it speaks to the quality of your microphone, right? Um,
Yeah, it
so,
might be a little bit too good.
too good. Yeah, too good. The altcoin landscape is pretty interesting at the moment. At least to some extent, you could make the argument that, this show is redundant because most of the interesting altcoin stuff is happening like on Solana, for example, or on chain. And a lot of market activity in general has sort of gravitated towards really high risk, low liquidity, high rug risk, but high multiple potential reward type of lottery ticket speculation on Solana, and then even on Base more recently, and pretty much on chain on all the chains, versus the good old boring boomer centralized exchange trading. A funny example of this is a tweet from Borovic, and one of the, you know how people have just been tweeting their Solana addresses and
Oh
raising
yeah,
hundreds of thousands, sometimes tens of millions of dollars. So one of these accounts, I think they raised around 30 million. Maybe my number is wrong, but it was a lot. It's in the 32 million says in the thread, and then he went into the Radium Discord to ask how to set up a liquidity pool. So
yeah.
there's some contrast for you, right? People just randomly send you $30 million, and you're like, well, how do I use the chain? Basically, it's pretty extraordinary, and that's been the meta recently in terms of you just tweet a Solana address and for a pre-sale, and people send you money, and then what you do with that is is a completely separate question. We've seen some influencers have a quite precipitous fall from grace, falling for the same thing. And it always starts off as like an innocent, jovial, oh, this is just for fun, I'm trying this out. And then when the money gets big enough, the behavior changes, unsurprisingly. So that's the first thing to note. The second bit of context to note is that as a result of the recent price action, when the markets moved lower, at least funding is reset, right? So when you're
Yeah.
assessing your arguments for, do I want to be long this thing? Do I want to hold this long? How expensive is it going to be? While price action was better when everything was just going straight up and pre-washout, at least now you can make an argument from, at the very least, the cost of trading point of view, that if you want to be buying altcoins the way things are now, a lot of the really over-leveraged, really aggressive participation on the perp side has been washed out, and it's basically cheaper to be in those trades on the perp side. So with those two things in mind, contextually, what do you think of altcoins, considering the pre-sale plus on-chain meta, and then altcoins post, I guess, funding reset, price action washout as well?
I think it's an interesting space, but I think you have to be very, very nimble, basically. Like Bitcoin moves one way or the other, you have to kind of respond to it and then jump in and out of positions, or have like high conviction bets that you just stick with, right? Because how it's been trading, basically, like all of these memes are either rugs or like million% run ups. But I think most people just don't necessarily trade that, because it's a really weird place to trade if you trade any size, right? Unless you just love the degening aspect of it, which I think is fine. Like if you trade like hundreds of these coins, then I mean you can have some fun. But I think just generally, like the altcoin space as a whole, you have to be very, very nimble right now. Like stuff is heavily underperforming, and then it goes up 20-30% in one day, and then it goes back to bleeding, or like just generally it's a space where you have to be very, very active. Otherwise, I think you're not going to have too much fun. And that's good for traders, right? Like if the market is moving a lot, and this is something that we've been seeing in the more interesting altcoins anyway. There's been decent movements, the up and downside. That's an interesting place to trade, but it's also one, especially, and this is something we've seen when Bitcoin went down from like 68 to 60k ish. Very vulnerable space too, right? Where stuff just instantly goes down 50% overnight, just because Bitcoin moved like 5 or 10%. So like the high time frame stuff is quite hard to say, but the low time frame stuff, there's decent trades there, most definitely.
Yeah, it certainly looks that way. In terms of the pre-sale meta, I still think in its current form, it's a sort of net drain on crypto.
Oh yeah, it's
because
bad.
there's no sort of, to use economic terms, money multiplier going on there, I think, in most cases. It's just these so-called teams raise a disproportionate amount of whatever the native token is for that chain, Solana being the most prominent example, and then that just gets sent to Binance, and that really doesn't help, and that doesn't trickle down, it doesn't get redistributed, it doesn't cycle through, it's just a straight up drain from holders and traders who would otherwise be in the market to just going to enriching the proprietor of the contract address, essentially. I don't think that's particularly great. But that's how high risk appetite is, right? And I think part of the larger issue is that if you consider crypto VC, there's a general consensus that it's a really, like, if you're early to stuff or you're a seed investor or whatever else, that's kind of how you get rich and how you make money, right? And it's no surprise that a lot of large Twitter accounts, etc., gravitate towards this and also get criticized for it. And there's this whole sort of back and forth on this exact topic, because the idea, when seen from the outside, is that if you get to invest really early to something, you have an asymmetry in terms of information, but then also entry price. And most of the time, if you're like a big Twitter account, the terms that are associated with your involvement, you're not getting locked up for like 3-4 years and like a robust vesting schedule and whatever else, right? It's a very cynical economic transaction where the team essentially wants to leverage your following to create liquidity, and they align with you by giving you whatever percentage of the token or other incentives to facilitate this very, very quick market cycle. And I think part of the reason, at least, why these pre-sales are so popular is because the average Joe or Jane who may not be a crypto Twitter large account or whatever else, they see the term early sale, pre-sale, or whatever else, and in their mind, that sort of correlates with being early and making money. Like, you've always seen these crypto influencers be early and I've invested in this and I seeded this and whatever else. And in your mind, you make the connection between that being early and making money. But now that it's public and it's just a contract address and you can be on the same level, then you can also be early and reap that benefit, even though I don't think that the logic works out that way. I think in crypto, people yearn for a sense of being early to something, being pre-seed to something, and getting something before it gets listed and so on and so forth. And that risk appetite, at least one of the forms it's manifested, is sort of blindly aping into these pre-sales. And even the scammers and impersonators have been making a ton of money. There's like a Jared from Subway.eth, the famous sort of MEV on-chain account or address, that there was an impersonator that made hundreds of thousands there. Ansem had an impersonator that also made a lot of money. So it is really crazy. What's your view on this kind of desire to be early and the sort of pre-seed meta? Because it affects everyone at this point, right? Like, the average crypto punter will get a piece of it. Centralized exchanges are also involved in the fray because these market caps basically get speed run and they want the trading volume, the liquidity, so they want to list it. Obviously, influencers see that everyone is doing it, and maybe they were doing it before, maybe slightly more conservatively or in secret, but now it's an open secret and / nobody cares. There's a complete apathy to it. It's just like a race to make money. And so suddenly you just throw all your entire audience under the bus as long as you get to make enough money. It's pretty transformative in that regard. But do you have maybe not a moral sense of this, but in general, what do you think of my little ramble there?
I mean, generally, and I mean, this is just my opinion, but generally, I look at this and I'm like, this obviously like not great. This is gonna have a lot of regulatory kind of. This is gonna get looked at by regulators pretty surely, right? But I also think that, technically speaking, this is not really that much different from what we've seen anyway. Like, a lot of these kind of like early deals that you were talking about, a lot of the shit that we have in crypto is actually just useless under the hood anyway, right? But then you have a bunch of VCs that invested early that throw around like some fancy terms to make it look good. Then they shill it for a couple of years, and the coin goes up. They dump on your head, and there you go, right? Whereas now it's basically just random dudes from the community making that profit, which I think isn't really that much of a difference. It just looks a little bit less sophisticated. The end result is relatively similar. So I both get the cynical view and the non-cynical view. The non-cynical view is just like, yeah, if that didn't happen, we would have had just a bunch of VCs basically shielded their dog shit to us, and the same thing would have happened. The cynical view is like, just because someone does something wrong doesn't mean we have to all join in too, right? And that's kind of how I look at it personally. Like, I would never make a coin. I feel like that's beneath me. Seems kind of just, yeah, seems like a sad thing to do, especially if you know that it's not going to lead to anything, right? When we all know that all of these meme coins, there's no end game to this. The end game is the gambling. The end game is price go up or price go down, which is quite sad. But then again, it's something that I think most of us are very used to in crypto, because a lot of even the quote unquote sophisticated stuff that gets shilled to us by these big funds, big entities in crypto is not really that much different, right? It's some kind of garbage where you have a team that's working on something that's just basically there to make it look decent, and at the end of the day it doesn't lead to anything.
It's the same game, just with a prettier PowerPoint, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And this is basically why it's a little bit hard to critique this, even though I think we all should. It's just because this is the name of the game anyway, and if it's people from the community doing it, I mean, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's a question of like, how many layers of abstraction do we want to add to this fundamentally broken and cynical process, right?
Yep.
So if you almost had to defend this practice, you would essentially merge the argument you made that this is what happens anyway, but at least now it's somewhat more transparent, or at least we've kind of stopped pretending. And then you could also make a political/ideological argument where you say, well, this is the natural consequence of having restrictive accredited investor laws that are broken, and this is a crypto native answer to those. But no one actually fucking sits down and has these philosophical discussions, right? Like, no one gives a fuck. It's like, how much money can I raise and how quickly can I send it to Binance to make myself rich, you know? Or how much of this can I buy and then shill it on Twitter to make as much money as possible when everyone is aping into anything in a very sort of indiscriminate fashion? I think that's probably the more accurate reflection, but I think it's useful at least periodically to zoom out and discuss these things. That said, now that we've lost all of our audience, Don, let's talk about some of these charts. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to go about it. We just nuke everyone that was actually watching for something that they care about, which is the chart, and then give them what they would have wanted.
I mean, that's the technical roundup way, right? You bait them in, and they're like, oh, here comes the TA portion and the trading bit, and go off on some philosophical tangent that's poorly developed, and then once everyone's lost, go back to line make boing. So on my so-called watch list, which I created before this show, I've got WIF, Ajax, Dogecoin, FET, Floki, Pepe.
Oh, we're so doomed.
RNDR, Solana, and then your two favorites, Lido and Uni. I actually want to start with Solana, and that's because you have had a wonderful time on Twitter.com.
It's been great, yeah.
Yeah, and specifically because I don't remember exactly when this was, I'm sure you can clarify, you essentially made the argument that my focus for the months going forward will be ETH instead of Solana. And you're sort of generally expecting weakness in Sol against ETH. And then that was at a local top. Then the market went down, and then it ripped up again, and now every second comment you get on the website is calling you a washed up idiot. And I'm personally not really happy with that. Not because I care about you, but that's because it's my job, right? I'm the only one I'm the designated duck washed up name caller. And the fact that
true, they're taking your job away.
Exactly. They're taking my job away. This is something I hold very dearly, and a duty. Like, insulting you and making you feel bad is something I take very seriously. So the fact that people are making light of it and trespassing on my holy ground, I'm not happy with. But that said, do you want to kind of either review that idea or clarify why you're getting cooked so hard? Were you wrong? Are you washed up? What do you think of SolETH? I think it's a good petty grievances platform here.
Oh yeah, I mean, basically, I was like, I find ETH more interesting than Sol end of last year, and it went down quite a bit. Like it was down at some point from where I said it, like 30% or something, like Sol versus ETH, and then obviously we had last week, we had that massive rally that actually went above the high where I said it. And my comments has basically been like, okay, you just suck. You don't understand. You don't understand the new paradigm that is Solana. And yeah, it's been fun. Like that's literally like 90% of the mentions I get. If people, like some people were like surprised when I got like shit thrown at me and I responded like in a little bit of a harsher way, and people like, oh, why are you so triggered? It's like 90 to 95% of my mentions are from Solana people right now telling me that I'm the biggest idiot on the planet and I don't understand anything. So that's kind of been my Twitter experience. I cannot remember the last time it was this aggressive, which is quite funny. Given it's actually not like, it's not like I called this like I was like, okay, Solana is gonna go to zero. It's just like I'm more interested in ETH, and I think Solana is gonna go down relative to it. Now, obviously, at this current point, that idea is the red, as in like Solana is like up 10%, 15% against ETH since I said it. And I kept updating the idea, so I kept on updating it, and it was at the low point where I last updated it. So that's kind of the point where people are kind of quoting it from. So they're like, "Ha, you're such an idiot! 40% ago, you said Sol ETH is gonna perform poorly, and now look at you," which is fair enough, honestly. But I still think the idea is largely valid. I just think I was early
So
on it.
respectfully, the plan remains unchanged, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I still wish I could take that trade, honestly. I think the sentiment is so wildly off. People hate ETH, people love Solana right now.
Is there a
And I think,
side of that that you think is, I guess, more powerful than the other? Is it that the ETH sentiment is so bad, or is it that
oh
the
yeah,
Solana
yeah. I
sentiment is
think
so high, or is it like both
no,
super extreme? Which one is
I think
worse?
both are really extreme. Like I've never seen, besides like when ADA was at the top, where people were like ADI is like the greatest thing ever, and you had the maximum retardation
Sure.
that I've seen in a long time. That was ADA last time it made like a significant high. Ever since then, I haven't seen anything like the Solana Feather, which is fair from the user perspective, as in you can actually use Solana, and you for the longest time couldn't use ETH. But I still think the sentiment on both of these is at an extreme, and I generally think ETH is. I mean, I generally think ETH's not going to go to zero, which a lot of people seem to think now. And it was the opposite, if you remember back, like 6, 7, 8, 9 months ago, when I was like, "Do not fucking buy ETH. This is the dumbest trade on the planet." Do you remember? Like, I was like, "This is the mid-curve trade of the century,
Yeah,
basically."
100%. That was
And
very well argued, I think, and hasn't really changed either for the time being.
no, but I think that's gonna change, high time frame wise. But I'm not entirely sure when it's gonna kick a little bit into gear. I think if Bitcoin goes down, ETH is gonna be one of the coins that's gonna hold up the best, which is really shitty for ETH holders, right? If you're like, if you're sitting in ETH and you're down 30% while everyone else is down 50, I mean, that's great for you, but you're not gonna be so happy about it. But I think that's where you're gonna see relative strength creep back into ETH. And I think at that point you're gonna start seeing ETH outperform. And then the further along we go, going into 2025, I think ETH's gonna perform quite well. Just because I think there is probably gonna be an ETH ETF down the line. I don't think it's gonna come in the next couple of months, but I think there's gonna be one. And to that note, I think there's a few other ones that could be interesting.
Are you
And
going
I
to
hate,
Dogecoin and Litecoin us, Don?
yes,
Yeah,
and I
I
hate to make
fucking
that
knew
list.
it.
I fucking hate to make that
What,
list.
you can
But
add Bitcoin Cash to it as well?
yes, Bitcoin
Oh,
Cash,
God.
Dogecoin, Litecoin. I think I did. I might actually even all three of those. I might actually give more chances to get an ETF than ETH. But I think the only serious one besides Bitcoin is ETH. So you're gonna get three shitty ones like Dogecoin, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash. Like those are the ones where I think they're maybe more likely to be a thing than ETH. But I think out of those four, ETH is the only serious coin, right? So I think ETH's gonna be a good play down the line. But yeah, it's gonna be a mad world if we actually get like one of those.
Someone
Like
needs to
no matter
file
which.
that shit, right? I don't think there are any filings for the three coins that you mentioned at the
No. But I
moment.
think the reason why I'm saying like I could see those three is because they're just so fucking useless, right? Like Litecoin is basically like Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, these are just like shitty old proof of work coins, right?
Yes,
And they're
exactly.
really
Like
boring. Whereas with ETH, you're like, well, the SEC wants to make it a security now, and there's like this whole staking native yield thing, and North Korea, you know. Whereas with the others, it's even more boring than Bitcoin, which is a very
oh
impressive
yeah.
accolade.
I mean, even especially now with ordinals and stuff, these are
Yeah.
actually just more boring than Bitcoin, which is really, really hard to do, right? But so I think there's going to be trades there on that front, the Dino coins of sort, just because they're so simple and so similar to Bitcoin. I think that's going to be an easy argument to make. Like if Bitcoin has one, why should Bitcoin copy number 1, 2, and 3 not have one? And I think that's a fair argument to make. But I think generally, like you want to bet on ETH in this, and I don't think anything else is gonna come anytime soon. So that's why I think ETH's gonna be decent. Whether Solana is actually gonna underperform like I expected it to, I don't know. It's been showing incredible strength. It's been quite impressive to see, actually. I think the reason why I picked Solana, not anything else, was just because it was the hottest coin, and I was temporarily right. So it's always from like a pissing people off perspective. It's always nice to kind of poke the beehive of sorts that is active, not the one that like. Why would I be saying like ETH is gonna go up more than Litecoin? That's just fucking boring. Everyone knows that that's the case. So I was like picking the stronger one. Might have been wrong on that. We'll see down the line.
If
But I
you can't
think
handle the heat, Don, got to get out the kitchen, right? Like you got to deliberately poke the strong coin. You'll be surprised.
oh, I love it though. I love it. It's my passion. Like I see something that is beloved by everyone, and I'm like, let me shit on this.
Do you take the same approach to your family life as well, or are there lines to it?
There's a little bit of lines to
A
it,
little
but
bit of
not
lines,
that many.
not that many. No, didn't think
Yeah.
so. Don,
That's why I
half an
keep
hour
shitting
with.
on YouTube.
Well, yeah, sure. That's the only reason, definitely. Half an hour and no TA, Don. Should we just
Oh,
end the show? Can you imagine how fucking hilarious that would be? It's like that's
oh
it.
yeah.
This is just a yeah. Altcoin pontifications with no charts. Not that we're remotely intelligent enough to do that. Let's start with Whiff, Don.
Yeah, should we not talk about like Bitcoin very briefly?
Sure. Go on. In a
Like
nutshell.
in a nutshell, I think if Bitcoin goes down, altcoins go down harder. If Bitcoin bounces, you're gonna see the usual suspects outperform. And if it goes up aggressively, I think altcoin Bitcoin pairs are gonna struggle to keep up until Bitcoin slows down. Like that's the Bitcoin portion of the whole
Right.
thing, which I think is like pretty well understood. But I just wanted to mention it because
Up,
people are
down, down. You know, it's
yeah,
fucking
I think
GTA cheat codes.
yeah, but it's really like if Bitcoin nukes, you're gonna have a terrible time in altcoins, and we saw a little bit of a preview on that like in a couple of days ago,
Sure.
right? Like where altcoins went down. So this is something. That's why I said you have to be nimble because there's good trades to be had. But if Bitcoin goes up or down too much, it's gonna get rough.
Yeah, if you're wrong about a BTC move, just don't expect to make money. Essentially,
Yeah.
on the alt front, the dog still has a hat, Don. As far as I'm aware,
Does it still have the hat?
I've done careful fundamental research on this.
Because what if like people are saying this, but the dog actually doesn't have the hat on right now, and it's just has the hat on in the picture?
Well, they sold the picture for like $4 million or something, so presumably it wouldn't have been purchased for that price if in reality the hat were off. I can't believe this is a real conversation. Nonetheless, 27-year-old man, by the way. This thing is very resilient. Like
it has been,
even with all the altcoin wipeouts or anything else, and you can imagine like the large amounts of realized gains or unrealized gains that participants who are sufficiently early to this are sitting on. Hasn't even broken market structure on the daily. That's pretty fucking impressive.
Oh yeah, it hasn't. Yep. Because on the 4 hour it has. In the 4 hour it's in a downtrend, a very, very weak downtrend, but you can very clearly see lower highs and lower lows.
Sure.
But on the daily it's true, yeah. It's not that bad.
Yeah, daily market structure holding up on this thing. GCR bought the NFT for it essentially.
That's what made the daily move, right?
Like that certainly basically. That helped. And this just seems, if you're going to go for like almost blue chips of meme coins, which is completely oxymoronic as a term. But this is absurd, isn't it? But like in terms of blue chips of meme coins, just from attention span and price action resilience, this thing, also how it performs on bounces in general, this thing gets bid up pretty quickly. I think this kind of belongs on a watch list in general. FBI, DOJ, but no, trading watch list specifically. And I don't know.
Are you sure it's only that one? Well, maybe it should be on all of those.
Let's start with just the trading watch list. Like, I don't think this is a terrible one by any means, is what I'm trying to say. Like, if you want to position, like if you want to be buying alts and you have like a meme coin risk appetite, I think this is like pretty reasonable. Now, the volatility is insane, right? Like you might be thinking, well, look, it hasn't even broken market structure in the daily, so it must be pretty stable and not as volatile as the other coins. If I just take the recent high to low, that's like a 40% correction, 45%. And it's done fuck all on the daily time frame and it's still moved 45%. And this is what I think gets perp, sort of the BTC ETH perp traders, when they start trading altcoins, they get completely screwed over trading like much lower market cap, higher volatility meme coins, because if in their brain, their rough position sizing is for like 2, 3, 5% moves, and then shit starts moving 20, 30, 40%, like all of your mental models and calculations are wrong. And you just get carried out by the vol at this point, especially if there are perp listings. But just in general, I quite like this. Think if Bitcoin gives you like, continuation to the downside, for example, and you get like a range low wipeout or just a deeper move into daily support on this thing. If the market bounces, which, even if it's a larger trend correction, there's always a bounce post wipeout. I don't hate this at all and think it hasn't really faded out of relevance enough to be removed from any watch list or to jump away from it too quickly. The only levels levels on this thing I'm always cynical about, but I mean $2 is like a nice sort of range low, somewhat daily level as well, and it's a nice psychological round number meme. And I think depending on the size of the move in any case, I mean, if it's lower, there's sort of 170, 180 cluster, that type of thing. So sub $2 liquidations / forced sellers essentially. And if the market has bottomed out here on the BTC front, as you mentioned, there's like a 4-hour downtrend and just kind of sideways going on. Getting like a higher high through that, or just like a shift from what's going on at the moment, you've just a resolution to this lower time frame consolidation. If you're then your underlying assumption is altcoins are going to go up for like 1, 2, 3 weeks, then just doing business on that front without any kind of deeper breakdown makes sense as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm largely in agreement with that. I mean, it's a meme coin. I just checked where it is on the market cap kind of list, and it's placed like 50 something.
That's pretty high. Huh?
Yeah, it's pretty high, but it's also not like it is unreasonably high because it's a fucking Dogwifhat, but but it's not like unreasonable. For example, like Shiba is like at place 11, and I think that's quite unreasonable, right?
Sure.
Like that's above Link, that's above Matic, that's above Uniswap. It's above a lot of things that are actually like decent projects.
Not that matters, right?
No, it doesn't really matter, but like for example, like if I would want to trade a meme coin, I would want to trade something that has like potential to go up quite a bit, right?
Look,
Like
we're going to put the dog on the sphere in Las Vegas, Don. We literally raised the money for it. So
yeah.
like
So
we raised the money for the sphere, and GCR bought the NFT. There you go. There's your fucking thesis.
yeah, so I don't hate it, even though it's like higher on the market cap list. I think it's a little bit like Pepe. I like Pepe better because it's a little bit more sophisticated meme.
Do you feel good saying that out loud?
Oh, I mean, this world is a joke. This space is a joke, and it all needs to end very fast.
There's the European, I know.
Yeah, but I mean that's just how it is right now. This is how stuff has been trading.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't hate on it. I just think like I look at the market structure and I see a low time frame downtrend, and I think until that is at least like either you have a little bit of time pass or until that is broken, I'd be a little bit careful and I'd be looking for pullbacks, right? And pullbacks on this one can go quite deep, I think. Like even like 40-50% corrections even from current prices wouldn't surprise me one bit.
That's literally what it did from the high, and you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at the chart.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like a normal pullback, right?
Yeah, it's like 5%, 7. It's like 45.
If you look at the daily time frame, for example, like you look at that thing, you're like, oh, a normal pullback. Like if you ignore the price levels and how much it would be like a normal pullback would go to 0.9, right? Because you're like, okay, it has a massive uptrend, but it overshot by quite a bit. Could easily go to 0.9. That's like where it could wick to and would still look quite decent. But then you realize that that's so far down that at that point it's probably
you didn't even want to buy it at that point.
Yeah.
And that's something bad happened for it to go there type of thing.
Yeah. And that's the problem with a lot of these coins when they go up so fast, right? You're like, where do I buy this thing? Like, where does it actually make sense? And you either have to buy it at valuations that are quite high, or you probably just don't buy it all. And I think your support levels, I think anything like the daily cluster at like 1.5 or the daily cluster at 1.8, those are interesting. That's where you want to see buying. And I think anything below these, and then this turns from a decent buy or like something that might be interesting to, okay, you might be getting aggressive dips that you can take advantage of, but you don't want to stick around for too long. I think if those break, right, like if 1.5 or 1.8 breaks and you actually do get deeper dips, I think at that point you should assume that the trend is over. And one thing that people really shouldn't be forgetting is that these are meme coins, right? Inherently useless and inherently worthless too, without the speculation, right? So once the music stops, you're either stuck with this or you're not. And so you have to be quite brutal in assessing this, as in like at the moment it stops doing what you want it to do, which is going up, you have to be merciless in cutting stuff like this. But for some reason, people look at meme coins, they buy it because they're like, meme coins go up, and then they fall in love with the coin and delude themselves into thinking that there's actually more to it. And there's not, right? Like,
well done. It's very easy to fall in love with something that makes you rich. Just ask your fiance. No, I'm joking. Please don't show her this segment. I swear to God, mate. Like, if I get disinvited from all your personal events, I'm just going to unalive myself. When I see a joke, I've just got this tick. I have to say it.
Well, she's gonna hear from this.
I hate you.
No, I'll keep this one to myself.
Thank you. I will tweet it out. Don't worry, do that. Should we put down the other dogs, Don? There's Dogecoin.
I like Dogecoin though.
So I don't know which time frame. If you look at the weekly, it sort of had some deep wicks, but not in a way that sort of violated market structure or turned into a failed breakout in any large sense of the term, right? Sort of more or less held up. Spiked previous week's low, spiked the low before that, and is generally trading around last week's open, which isn't bad. The daily time frame's like slightly more cumbersome, I think, because that broke down, and from a market structure point of view, like unlike WIF, for example, it's a clearer market structure break. I guess that's one way to describe it. And then the lower time frames are just a bit messy. Like I'm looking at the 4 hour, and this is a chart I would just like click next on in most cases. With the exception of, I don't hate the level at like 14 cents because there's a bit of a failed breakdown there at that range low. What do you think of Dogecoin? do you, I mean, I don't think the price performance like today is particularly indicative because we've got a bit of a mixed bag in altcoins in general during BTC chomp. But you said you like Doge. What's the main argument there?
I think generally before this cycle is over, Dogecoin is going to trade at $1. Like that's a pretty strong belief I got.
So this is an extraordinary entry, is what you're saying.
I think generally like anything in between where we are right now and 0.1 is quite a good entry, yeah. And I could be completely wrong on that, but I just generally have a feeling that this is going to get picked up again. And Elon Musk, God bless his whatever.
Emerald mine?
Yeah. If the moment this goes up, he's going to chill it. He will not chill it at lows, but he will chill it if it goes up. And I think this could be supercharged at like 0. Pun intended, 0.35, 0.4. And then there's going to be enough Elon Musk fanboy exit liquidity at 1 to make me quite happy. So I think that's kind of like, that is one trade where I think it doesn't have to play out. I think the chances of it are not like 50-50 yet. It's going to go to 1, unless you say 50% yes, 50% no, because you've been on the internet for too long.
I mean, that's how probability works, right? It either happens or it doesn't. I don't understand the complexity here.
Yeah, but I think the chances that it goes to 1 is quite decent. So I think generally Dogecoin is a decent bet.
There you go. So it's like a cycle exuberance bet type of thing, more so than this is super technical. Here's the support, here's the resistance type of thing.
Yeah, but also like if you look at Doge BTC on the weekly time frame,
which is something I do every morning, like a normal person.
First thing I do.
Yeah, I bet.
You have a really nice support with those two green candles before the last down move.
I gotcha.
That's something we dipped into, we bounced off of. I think as long as that holds, Dogecoin seems like a decent bet.
You've got BTC Confluence, I know that gets you excited, Don.
Yeah, like that's Dogecoin, Bitcoin Confluence. That's also generally just, I would be surprised without a Doge move end cycle. And I mean, it's Doge USD was in a downtrend for the longest time, brutally went sideways for the longest time, and now has started an uptrend, right? Like a clear uptrend of sorts. And as long as that isn't invalidated with a close below 0.07, I think it's a decent bet. It's just a question of, do you think Bitcoin like gives you a better entry than now? Right. And I think the chances of that is decent. Like buying at 0.15 or buying at 0.1, that's in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you still make a shitload of money if you bought 0.15, but obviously you'd be happier if you bought at 0.1. The multiplier is quite a bit larger. But yeah, I look at this and I'm like, I'm expecting this to go up. Doesn't have to. I'm not guaranteeing it, but this seems like a decent bet, generally speaking.
Also, there's a simple answer to your dilemma of, do I want to, like, if I have a higher target, do I want to buy this now or do I want to wait for the BTC dip? And obviously, if you buy it now and BTC dips, you could have had a better entry. If you don't buy it and wait for the BTC dip and it doesn't happen, then you get no entry, right?
Yeah.
The simple solution there is you scale in tiny position sizes and then you use the P&L card to LARP on Twitter that you were full size from like a good price. That seems to be the going rate on solving that problem. So you're welcome.
Oh, thank you very much.
You're so welcome. The final dog to put down is Floki. This kind of overtook the dog meta for a while, right? It was like this sort of insane performer. If you look at this weekly chart, it looks comically absurd. And even the daily, you know, a lot of these alts on the recent washout that you mentioned at least came close to, if not hit, something that was visible on the daily time frame. So but this one didn't, right? So if you look at the daily cluster, that's at like 15-ish, didn't even come close, and rallied before that. I think if you go on the 4 hour, it becomes slightly, you know, it's sort of getting there, traded into the previous range. Even that wasn't super clear, but strong reaction as well. So we've got like 3 dog coins that each arguably have their own arguments, right? So on the WIF side, it's like, well, this is the Solana meme coin. There's a kind of recency bias, lots of new mimetic value. It's the new kid on the block, so on and so forth. For Dogecoin, it's like, well, this is the cycle classic and potential Elon fanboy exit liquidity. And on the Floki side, it's like, well, if people are at certain points in the market are looking for dog beta, and
this is so cursed.
I know this is so cursed. Like I can't wait to just archive and unlist all these videos and pretend this chapter of my life or this specific conversation never happened. Like talking about perps and derivatives, I feel like it's somewhat justifiable, right? I'm like, oh well, look, it's like a structured product and there's nuances to it. But being like, look, there are 3 dogs. Which dog is the best, Don? That I feel less comfortable with. So from a technical point of view, do you think there's anything here? I don't know if you subscribe at all to the not fundamental argument, because there isn't that, but like the timing argument, whether that's compelling, and if not, is there something technical here where you're like, well, God knows which of these 3 dog coins and in which order are going to do well, and but I like the TA setup at X. Is there an X?
I mean, no, not really. It's like, because the thing is, and the reason why I'm saying this, right, because there is no level unless this is down 90%. Right, and then if it's down 90%, we can talk about it next cycle again. So it's like,
well, it depends on your time frame, surely, Don. Right, like if we go down to the 5-minute, we can find a level just to make an absurd like version of it. So it always depends how close you want to play to the market. Surely,
yeah. I mean, the 4-hour time frame. If you go on the 4-hour on Floki, right, it retested the previous highs, and that's where the current bounce is from. But would I want to buy a coin that's called Floki? That is like a meme dog, whatever the fuck. I don't even know what Floki is exactly, to be quite honest.
I think it's a Viking type dog coin.
Yeah. That is up like 700% in the last month or so. Like, is that something that I'm realistically interested in buying? And the answer to that has to be no, right? And I'm very happy to be the boomer in this, where I'm like, the already pompadour, right?
yeah.
But like with meme coins, there is, and this is also like a very boomer opinion, but there is no value to this shit, right? So if you buy in when it's up 10, 20, 100x, you're betting on finding greater fools down the line, which very well could happen, but I'm not well versed enough to know whether Floki is gonna have greater fools down the line, and I also don't know the holders of Floki well enough, where I don't know if they've already, like the bigger holders that have been cashing in on this move have been cashed in already, or if they're still due to do that. I know for example, I know Dogecoin and how it behaves, right? I've been trading that for years. I kind of know the community and how that goes, but I feel much less comfortable trading these at valuations that they have. And that is a very boomer opinion, and this is not something that you necessarily should copy. I think generally the meme coins with smaller market caps, if you can take advantage of that, that's the best way to kind of kickstart your trading career. That's basically how I did it with Dogecoin back in the day, right? Like my whole trading stack, or like at least 90% of it, comes from a $50 Dogecoin investment down like in 2014 or something. And that's where I made my money, right? So I'm not here to kind of advise people not to do it. I'm just saying generally, at this point of my trading career, this is not something I necessarily would be trading. And the TA side of things is muddy to say it very lightly, right? If you're not trading the 1 hour or 4 hour time frame, there's nothing on these coins.
Yeah, you kind of fucking have to, right? Because I mean, the underlying thesis for any of these is some version of, everything's up a shit ton, but everything's going to go up a shit ton more. And if I wait for daily, weekly pullbacks, I don't even want to be fucking buying them at that point because the trend is likely over. It's like it's like the high time frame dilemma, right? Like you wait for the high time frame level, you don't get it. By the time you get it, you don't want it. And you solve for that by going on lower time frames, and also being aware at the same time that at some point your low time frame trend following will make you eat shit, and it'll that's it, you're wrong basically. But I agree, even on like purely technical terms, like there are better charts with better lower time frame levels. Like if you're biting the bullet and saying I'm going to trend follow on low time frames, it's not like all low time frames are made equal either. So fine, so we've put down all the dogs. Pepe, your favorite coin, Don, and you shielded this on the last Altcoin Thursday, and it went up a lot. $0 were made from the call.
But a million cloud was harvested,
and that's actually way more important.
I actually didn't harvest at all.
Oh well, it's never too late, Don. So this chart, when we discussed it last time, it was a bit of a, well, similarly weird discussion. Like, what the fuck are we doing looking on the weekly? It's kind of like an all-time high. I guess that's a level, but also what are we doing? That really hasn't changed all too much, I imagine, at least not on that time frame. The daily is actually, that's got some sort of structure. I don't know if you agree or not.
Yeah, it does.
But I think there's like a plausible cluster at 700 to 630-ish. And we even poked through the bottom of it and then a really strong engulfing candle afterwards. And then the 4 hours kind of just like a big range, right? I'm wondering what your view is. Like, if you wanted a piece of this, let's say you missed the cluster bottom or whatever else, I know your answer would be, well, I'd be buying the bottom or some version of that, right? Like, I either buy the bottom or I didn't touch it at all. Like, fair enough. But if you're viewing this type of consolidation now, where, for example, daily support has held and on the lower time frames / in general, it's moving sideways, do you see that as a positive construction? Or is it like, well, I guess I'll just stay the fuck out unless it gives me another good entry?
So like I'm not gonna buy this unless it giga nukes, to be fully transparent. But generally, when I look at these things, right, and I look at Doge, and I'm like, this has so much more potential, right? And Dogecoin is in the meme coin basket, and Dogecoin is the biggest meme coin out of them all for now, anyway. And if I'm saying I could see Dogecoin go to $1, like if I think about these meme coins, there's a good chance like that would be like Dogecoin to $1 would be like a whatever 7x from where it is currently. And if you think that Dogecoin is going to do a 7x, there's a good chance that these smaller meme coins are going to do more than that, right? But just TA wise, just looking at it, it's very, very hard to trade almost all of these. I do agree with you that on the daily time frame, Pepe had like a nice level that got tested. If it gets tested again, I wouldn't want to buy it. Like if you bought that level, cool, good for you.
That didn't sound jaded or cynical at
all. No, but I mean, this is actually one of the meme coins where I was like, I'm actually on board for this cycle. I hated it last cycle because the people that were shilling it was just the biggest losers on the planet. But they got washed out, right? They got washed out from like the middle of 2023 all the way towards this year, really. So they had like the 6 months of pain where the idiots got washed out. I like the holder base much better now than back then. So yeah, I think generally, if the moment you get like a Bitcoin bottom, Pepe is going to be interesting. So at that point, I might buy it. Irrespectively of whether this has dumped enough for me to generally usually buy it. Like if I would make a meme coin basket, I would put Dogecoin, Pepe in it, and I would probably leave it at that. Like one, Pepe being the very hyper speculative one, Doge being the more safe one, and then I would try to buy actually useful shit, even though it's probably going to get outperformed.
Yeah, exactly. I also think it's maybe for the audience's sake worth making a distinction between like trader brain and multi-week, multi-month cycle investor brain, right? Like the difference, like if you have an outlook of many weeks and many months of upside with the cycle being generally defined by its memes, then the difference between 700 support and 800 bounce from support isn't immaterial. It's unquantifiably irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
So whenever we talk about, like, just to convey our bias to the audience, when we talk about these things, it's like trader brain first. But contextually, if you have like a different either risk appetite or time horizon or whatever else, as long as it doesn't look like shit, then if your target is high enough or your time horizon is long enough, then it's the invalidation derived from the support level that's more important than the test of the support level itself. I don't know if that makes any fucking sense. That's at least how I think about it, right? Because a lot of the time, if you're going to be holding for many weeks and many months, you're some form of trend following at the very least, right? And you're going to be looking for mechanical signals to get the fuck out or rebalance or do whatever else when something changes. And so if we're talking about a support level and say, that's held, but doesn't mean I'll buy it, that's a trader brain thing saying the best entry is gone. But from like a trend following point of view, it's if anything an affirmation that it doesn't look bad, it's still, the trend is still intact. I don't know if you agree, but I think it's a useful distinction to make, because otherwise if taken literally at face value, it's like, well, I think memes are going to go up for the next few weeks and months, but it's bounced from support, so I'm not going to buy it. And that is a very weird statement to make,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, no, you obviously, and this is like it's quite it's really hard to kind of quantify this properly, like how you're gonna act in what way depending on what the market does. Like me saying, if I think Bitcoin has bottomed, I might buy this. It's like it's a little bit useless to the average listener, because I mean, when the fuck do I think that is gonna happen? And maybe it already has happened, right? Like a lot of people were writing me yesterday, being like, "Hey, you're such an idiot for not having bought like 61K, even though you had a support level there." And I think, like, obviously could be the bottom, but I honestly don't think so.
Oh,
Just
casual
because
Friday
something,
preview right there, Don.
yeah, obviously, like, just because you have a support and it holds doesn't mean it has to be the bottom, right? Like,
Sure.
you always have to expect, and it's the same with Pepe right now, for example, where we talked about the support level being hit and it bouncing, but that doesn't mean the bottom for Pepe has to be in, right? This support level can break, and it can put the bottom in somewhere completely in between the next support and the next resistance level, right? Like, oftentimes, actually, it's gonna just bottom in the middle of fucking nowhere, and people are gonna be like, "What the fuck?" But that is because altcoins as a whole kinda follow Bitcoin in a way, right? Like, Bitcoin gives the necessary context, as in, like, everyone kind of understands if Bitcoin dumped 30K, like to 30K tomorrow, you'd be down 80% on your altcoin, right? But for some reason, people cannot really put both of these together, like, and understand that you kind of have to have the right read on Bitcoin to be able um, to properly take advantage of the altcoins, unless you get in either early enough, or you just pick the very, very right coin. There's always going to be, like, in between, like, I would say 3 and 10 coins every single cycle, where it doesn't really matter if you get Bitcoin right, because they're going to go up regardless.
The chain link of 2018.
Yes, exactly. Or
Yeah.
like the Solana of 2023, 2024, right?
2025,
Where
2026. Yeah.
so, like, there is, and people just fail to put things into context and kind of try to trade the technicals on the altcoins on it, like, by itself. And
Yeah.
I think that is a mistake, unless you really pick right. Like, if you picked really right 2023, 2024, and you traded Solana, it didn't, like, you could have just looked at the Solana price action and made your decisions just based off of that, and you would have been just fine. But unless you are really good at picking, that's not gonna end well. If you look at, like, any other coins that did not what Solana did, you're gonna see that that wouldn't have been a good strategy at
Yeah.
all. So
It's
yeah,
almost like you have to ask, how Bitcoin insensitive can I be? And in
yeah,
most cases, the answer is not particularly, unless you're like very early, as you mentioned, or picked an outlier. I think that's very useful. I've got Agix here, Agix, AGIX. That's probably the right one. This is one of
yeah.
the, I mean, AI memes. I feel like the market just keeps sort of playing ping pong between dog stuff and AI stuff.
It is so fucking cursed.
I know, it's
The
incredible.
two worst fucking
The most
whatever.
contrived narratives in the world,
Oh
sure.
yeah,
But it works basically.
yeah.
This had a daily bounce actually from its cluster at 95 cents, which puts it into an exceptional category of altcoins that actually reach daily support. Now that might sound like a good thing, but the fact that it reached daily support, you could almost make an argument that it's bearish, right? Which sounds
We're so bad,
hilarious.
but
I know
it's actually true.
this shows the disaster, but you know exactly what I mean, don't you? Like,
Oh
if
yeah.
the market is really that strong and the daily supports are far and few between, and the market isn't spending enough time consolidating to form those supports, then the fact that they don't get hit is actually a sign of strength, because the dips are very shallow and the trend is strong. Whereas if you have a coin which is making its way to those daily supports, maybe it's weaker than everything else. Nonetheless, I think 95 cents is like a really good level. At least in the short to medium term, not least because there was this kind of nice looking over under price action at that level. Like if you look at 95 cents on the 4 hour, it kind of front ran it a little bit, and then it wiped out those lows into the daily support and then bounced. and that's always like quite nice. I still think, again, you can kind of build a decision tree depending on whether you think BTC is going to go down more or not, where if it's going to go down more, you might get to rebuy those 95 wicks and potentially down to 80 cents, which is the other side of that cluster. And if not, then it's one of those, well, the bounce is played out and I'm going to have to essentially chase it on lower time frames. And I think that's the harsh reality that a lot of the time you don't see on Twitter, or people are reluctant to talk about because it's not pretty and it's not ugly. But sometimes when you're waiting for a dip, the dip happens, you don't execute, and the market conditions shift. Like, if you want an entry, you're going to have to pay a bad price for it. And it's not even necessarily a bad price. It's just a worse price than if you were willing to take risk at lower prices. And that's just like life. I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, if you want more confirmation, you're going to have to chase / get a worse entry. If you want a better entry, you're going to have less confirmation. And I keep coming back to this theme, but just the more I think about things, it just seems to be true that in trading, you always need to pick your poison, you know? And there's always some sort of poison, and there's no free lunch. So depending on where you are on that extreme confirmation spectrum versus, you know, extreme best possible entry price / risk reward spectrum, you need to know where you stand and know what your trading strategy caters to between those. I think as long as you generally gravitate towards one, you can build a consistent, robust system. My least favorite articulation of that range essentially is when people get trapped in the middle. You know, so it gets to the level where they should be taking on more risk because it's objectively a really good entry, at least if it works out. But then they'll wait for like a soft confirmation or like a really weak confirmation or like a one minute green candle, and then they'll like buy that one. Well, it's like, well, what are you doing? You know, like you might as well at that point either buy it when it looks like shit if you really think it's going to work, or just give up that sexy looking entry and wait for real strength that really has a material effect on the probability of the trade. But this sort of in between, neither here nor there nonsense, where you're waiting at support and then you see like a 5 minute candle you like and then you buy it, like that sort of shit is just so noisy and messy. I personally don't think it's a good approach. But this is more fucking casual Friday content, and this show is way too long anyway. So I think if AI memes are going to do well, Ajax is, I mean, structurally, as long as that daily cluster holds, it still looks okay. Obviously a bit weakened. This is a daily downtrend from the highs at least, but that's pretty self-evident, lower highs and lower lows. But it could well be, if AI picks up a bid, this kind of, you know, this downward sloping diagonal structure that then just kind of breaks out in one candle. And I think the only reasonable area to do that is 95 close to market, 81 discounted to market, and if those fold, I don't think you want a piece of this personally. And would you agree that that's a prevailing theme for a lot of these, like where it has reached 4-hour or daily support? If that's not it, then get the fuck away from it, because that's like a multi-week, in some cases multi-month, like a market structure break, and you kind of don't want to be on the wrong side of that, generally speaking.
I think generally almost everything just went up only and now has started to turn into like 4-hour to daily time frame downtrends.
Sure.
And a lot of these have, like you said, reached support, like AGIX has. And yes, it's the closest support. And it's really like, you're like, this is the first support. So if this fails, I mean, there's supports below it, but I really think like those shouldn't fail. Like if they fail, I think you wanna give it some time. I completely agree with you there. Like if that fails, it's fucked. And generally to the entry kind of thing where you're like, oh, you're too afraid to buy it. If you get a first test of a daily level, more often than not, you're gonna make money on that, regardless of whether you're right that that's the bottom or not, right? Like you buy an untested level in a strong uptrend that gets retested. More often than not, you're gonna just come out fine, and you're gonna get the bounce, and then you can still sell into the bounce. The worst thing to do, and I completely agree with you there, is basically you see the level, you're like, I don't want to buy it, maybe it breaks, and then it goes up and you buy into it, because at that point you are only gonna be right if the market actually turns around. In the other instance, there's a good chance that you're gonna be right even if the market doesn't turn around.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're getting a discounted entry, right? And that might be just short term, and you might just make like 5 or 10%. But at that point, you're in from a good price. So it's much, much easier to be like, okay, let me see how this develops. Or just be like, hey, okay, I made 5 to 10%, I can get out. And maybe I get in higher when it's confirmed, whatever. The worst that you can do is just be like, wait for the daily green candle from the support and then just fucking buy in, especially during these kind of aggressive uptrends, because once they're going to end, that's how they're going to end. Like you get like this move into support, you're going to get a green candle. That's basically what I talked about. with Bitcoin yesterday, where I was like, of course you're gonna get a bounce from support, right? Like that's something that you should be expecting. The question is it gonna have follow through or not? And then if you, for example, yesterday freaked out at the low at 61K for Bitcoin, and then you're like, fuck it, now that it's back at 66K, that's an interesting, like now I'm interested, and you buy 66, 67 or 68, you're putting yourself in a really shitty position, I think. So like, you gotta have a little bit of balls, or have the patience to wait for like the higher time frames.
Yeah, fucking pick one, please. Right?
Yeah.
The approach you mentioned, one way to articulate it is that you're nuking your optionality, right? Because if you're buying at that discount, then if the market makes a new high and you're right, you'll make money. If the market ends up bouncing, but ends up putting in a lower high and sort of bleeding back down, you still have a pretty good chance of making money if your entry is good enough, right? And we both know from experience that your trade management skills in general are better if your entry is better. It's like your patience is higher and your objectivity is better because you're not staring at your P&L, and you kind of give yourself a bit more breathing room. Whereas if you're like hardcore confirm only, then unless, like if you're buying the top of that green candle bounce in whatever scenario, then the only way you'll make money is that if it ends up making a higher high and ripping through, because God forbid that thing starts to bleed or retrace, or in some cases just even retest the level, you'll be puking that break even and staring at your red P&L all day. Agree there completely. And this has turned into some fucking hybrid trading philosophy, not really altcoin show, but here we go. I mean, this is the nature of Technical Roundup, I think.
Oh yeah.
Part of the reason we do this, and again, breaking the fourth wall, I still think it's useful to have a show which has value in rewatching old episodes and not just being a sort of market chasing momentum type of show, so that there's a higher probability that you learn at least one or two potentially useful principles and frameworks, so that even if you never watch Casual Friday or Altcoin Thursday or Technical Roundup again, you've like hopefully retained or learned something that you can apply in your own trading, as opposed to being like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, now I'm going to watch this YouTube video that's going to tell me what coins to buy, and then unless there's another YouTube video that tells me which coins to buy, I'm completely blind on my own. That doesn't really resonate with me personally. Or maybe we're just like verbose idiots, which is very believable as well. Don, let's do some of your coins.
Okay.
Lido. Okay, this thing looks amazing on the 4 hour. And it absolutely is not a cursed coin with like the worst reputation ever for not pumping.
It is.
So tell us why you're such a big fan.
No, the reason why I added it to the list is because generally this is very reliant on ETH strength, right? Which is the most cursed thing to be. Like the reason why it's been so cursed is because ETH's just been cursed, right? And I think Lido is gonna be excellent the moment ETH actually turns the corner, whenever that will be. So I don't necessarily think it looks the best right now. I don't think it's been trading the best in the last few months. I mean, to be fair, it's still at $2 something. It was at the same price like 2-3 months ago already. So that's not been that great. It's actually been at this price for a year now. Oh shit. Well, like it's been at this price for a year, and Bitcoin's ripped quite a bit higher. But I think that's going to be an interesting one the moment ETH picks up steam. So I think this is one that you should have on your watch list, just because it's going to be easy to take advantage of it the moment ETH goes. And I think that's going to happen in, I would say, the next 3 to 6 months. ETH's going to outperform a lot of other things. I'm not saying it's going to outperform Solana because I'm tired of getting shit on, but I still think that's probably the case. But I think that's going to be like a leveraged bet on ETH, basically. So if you like ETH, I think Lido is going to be interesting, especially given people are giving up on it now, right? Like I imagine you've been sitting in this coin for 1 year and you haven't gotten any appreciation in price, even though Bitcoin's been basically vertical for that year. So I think that's going to be an interesting one. And then I added another one to the list that, just from that perspective, TA wise, this is fucking horrendous. Don't look at the chart. Close your eyes. Don't look at it. But I find Uni also interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
And that one is actually at least interesting on the charts as well.
Well, it hasn't been the same price for 2 years or whatever, so that's already an improvement from your first pick, Don.
Yeah, I mean the Uni USD pair
Yes.
actually looks quite decent. I think it looks decent unless it loses $8. At that point, it would start looking a little bit shit. But that's been kind of like putting in an uptrend, and I think that's also a little bit reliant on ETH doing decent. So that's the stronger pick, just if you look at it, right? So
So your
Lido's been kind
altcoin
of
picks are just some version of ETH, please fucking go up, right?
no, no,
Like
no.
everything else is like memes, and I mean Dogecoin's the exception, but Lido and Uni, they seem somewhat contingent on ETH strength. But aren't you kicking that can down the road for later?
Oh yeah, I think like this is probably not gonna be the next like you're probably not gonna make too much money in the next few months.
Oh, what's the fucking point of this show then?
Yeah, I mean to be quite honest, like a lot of the coins we talked about, just from like a gut feeling alone, you're not gonna make money on them in the next few months.
Oh, great.
Um,
Well, thanks for
I
saving up two
I,
2 hours in, or however long it's been.
I mean, I was shilling Pepe the last time. Was like, this is probably gonna go up. It went up a shitload. This time I'm saying you're probably not gonna make too much money on
Okay.
these. But like the moment the market turns around, I think that those are gonna be good picks, and I think generally ETH's gonna do like on the next market turnaround when Bitcoin turns around, ETH's gonna do a little bit better than it has, and then you're gonna get some nice outperformance there. And Uni is performing quite well even with the ETH.
Yeah,
weakness.
that's true. That's true.
So that's one of the ones that has been on its own. Like if you compare it to almost everything else that isn't Solana or meme coin, that's been outperforming massively, right? So I think Uni in general, like even if you dislike the ETH leg of that trade, which I completely understand because ETH is fucking cursed, that one just generally shows strength.
Did you say if you disregard Solana and meme coins?
I mean,
Well, Don, if I disregard my left and right arms, I'm really good at holding things with my feet, you know, like. But I guess that's the standard. Also, you realize how scuffed this is. You're talking about like, oh well, multi-week, multi-month, whatever weekly market structure. If we want to do well in the algorithm, it's like the altcoins that you should have bought yesterday to make money. And if you're making altcoins you should buy right now to make money, you're kind of late. And then we've kicked the proverbial can down the road quite far.
Yeah, I think generally like the meme coin thing, if you want to be looking at something to trade in the next few days, 2 weeks, it's probably still gonna be the topic, right? Like I generally, and this is something I said quite early on in this rally, I was like, the meme coin thing is just kind of taking off so far that I think at this point it's very hard to put that back in the box, right? It's gotten so big that people are just like, the new entrants of last cycle basically learned that you can buy stuff that sounds good, or you can buy meme coins and get rich, right? And they're basically teaching their friends and their families that that's the case. And so I think the meme coins generally probably gonna be the place where most action is anyway. But the meme coins is also where the most loss is gonna be, right? Like if you pick something that is actually decent, then it's really hard to do in crypto, to be fair. But if you pick something that's actually decent, the chances of you coming out of this with like minus 80% portfolio is very little. At least not in the short term, maybe in the long term, but
yeah, it'll just bleed you down slower.
yeah.
At least with the meme coins, you rip the band-aid off, Don. You know, when you've made the wrong choice when you wake up the next morning and like the Twitter account doesn't exist anymore.
Oh, you know when we've made the wrong choice when you look at the fucking logo of the coin.
That's true.
But yeah, so like generally the meme coins is probably going to be where the action is, but at some point I think the actual serious coins are going to do at least somewhat well. Might actually be the end of the cycle things though, so we'll see about that. But yeah, those are the ones that I'm personally interested in. Doesn't mean you guys should be buying them.
We'll follow up in 6 months.
Yes, and I mean that's totally fine by me. But obviously, people that have been trading meme coins and making like 10,000% every other day, they don't necessarily need or want to heed like that advice or whatever the fuck that is.
Just a different time frame, right?
Yeah, and that's okay by me. Like I wouldn't want to be trading something with like a fucking I mean the whole meme coin thing is painful for me to trade.
Yeah.
Just because
on the same side though, if you've got like I don't know, like a 1K portfolio or even less, your advice sucks, and that's not like a slight on you, but it's just like in these conditions you should be deep in the trenches on Solana, on Base, just like
On Base,
muddying
I think.
yourself with everything that's on there.
I think fuck Solana now. And I mean, like, this sounds like so boomer, right? But every time I've said something like this, like, I was like, buy ordinals, right? Like, how long ago? Like, when we were talking the last time, like, what should you do with a small portfolio? And I was like,
Yes,
buy
I remember that.
ordinals. You know how much they're up? Like,
Oh, mate,
it's
a
actually
scary amount.
fucking insane. Like, they went completely insane. But I'm just too fucking lazy to do it, right? Like, I had the finger on the pulse, and I was just like too fucking lazy. And it's the same thing right now with, I think, Base. Basically, like, if the market trades well, I think you're gonna make, like, with a small portfolio, Base is probably gonna be the place.
Hey, that even rhymes. You have to know. You know it's right.
Yeah. At least in the short term, whatever. So I think that's basically it. But obviously, you're gonna get rug pulled. You're gonna get shit on. But I think that's, if you want to multiply your stuff with a high risk of losing it all, I think that's probably the place to be right now. Which, yeah.
Well, to quote Dostoevsky, "Scared money don't make money, pussy." I think that was in Brothers Karamazov. So we'll see.
Well,
that's a good note to end on, Don. After only 6 derailed tangents and a crumb of so-called alpha towards the end with Base and whatever else, because no one's talking about Base. My Twitter totally wasn't full of it in the last 2 days. So all the early cutting-edge breaking altcoin news on this channel, as our users are well aware, and our audience rather, hey, maybe users of our ref link, wink wink nudge nudge. Nonetheless, we're going to shut up. We have a lot to yap about, as the kids say nowadays, although I think waffle is a superior verb to yap. We can do that tomorrow for Casual Friday. Hope you enjoyed this meandering, convoluted episode of Altcoin Thursday. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.